This episode, portable heaters. Well, folks, it's been cold in Atlanta, and the Handyman pros have a discussion about portable heaters, including electric, kerosene, and propane types. If you need to bring heat to a specific area, the pros are talking about it. Welcome to the Handyman Pros Radio Show, home improvement and maintenance tips from the pros. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Handyman Pros Radio Show, where our goal is to help save you time, money, and aggravation on your home maintenance and repair. This edition's entitled Portable Heaters. To help me explain, I'm here with my ever-cheerful co-host, Noel Buddy John. John, this week, what has been going on?
Yeah, what's been going on? As we talked about before, and we were talking about this show, is that I got a furnace issue. So it's been cold here in Atlanta, as you just mentioned.
I did.
And without a furnace upstairs in my house, it's like sleeping at the 50-yard line on Lambeau.
And there you go.
And
nice.
It was pretty chilly last night. I think it went down to 27 outside. I think the bedroom was. I had electric heater in there, and that's what we're going to be talking about. Some of these space heaters, and thank goodness I've got a couple of these things. But I'm waiting for a part for my furnace.
I have to tell the genesis of this story. So we are sitting here and we are getting ready to record, and we're both like, yeah, it's a little cold. And we're like, and folks, for you people that live in the North, remember, both John and I lived in the North. I lived outside Rochester, New York, and John lived in Chicago. And so we are aware of cold weather, and we know that we're a little behind the times. But both of our bloods have certainly thinned out since we've moved to the greater Atlanta area. And so now, it gets into the 20s, and we're like, holy smokes, it's like zero out,
Yeah.
And
we really don't, dress for it anymore.
No,
either. I mean, it's not, we don't have all that kind of stuff. But anyways, yeah, you're right. It's you kind of get used to it, and then when we get a cold snap down here, it gets cold.
So, and one of the other things that people don't realize is houses in Atlanta are not insulated like they are up north too. So I'm making excuses, but I'm sticking to them, and that's going to be the end of it. So
right, there you go.
Away you go.
Yeah, there you go.
So anyway, in our genesis of this show, we were talking about electric heaters. We're like, hey, we should do a show on electric heaters. So lo and behold, here we are. So talking about electric heat.
Right. I think this is one of the topics that when, especially now, Larry, when people are working out of their house, a lot of people are working out of the house because of the virus and all that kind of thing.
Yep.
And, I've always had an electric heater. It's kind of a radiator-looking heater, and we'll talk about all these things in specifics. But first, from a space heater in my office, where I could shut my door and just use that, and really turn down the heat in the house.
Right.
Why heat the rest of the house?
Right.
If I'm in my office all day,
right.
When I was working. And I think a lot of people might want to pick up on that tip. Save yourself some money. And cut down on your gas or electric bill.
Gas, electric
anyways,
bill, wear and tear on your furnace, John. Yours isn't working too hard right now.
Yeah, no, yeah, mine's
dead on arrival.
Torn. Mine's worn and torn. So yeah, come on UPS, I need that part.
Yeah, right.
It's a little intermittent pilot.
So I'm
system.
This show we're going to talk about three different types of heaters. Basically, we're going to talk about electric, kerosene, and then also propane as well, and then the various subtypes of heaters that are available in those. There's some crossover in some of the heater types, so just bear with us. But we're going to talk about those three. And so probably if we're talking about these, John, let's talk about the differences between electric, kerosene, and propane in a general term, and then we'll get into specifics in each one. Do you agree with that?
Yeah. Let's go ahead. Just to start off, once again, I think you and I have used all these space type heaters.
Yes, I have.
And
I have.
Especially when we were up north, and my friends up there, we always had those big kerosene heaters, like in our garages and things like that. But right now we're talking about the electric. Let's just talk about the electric heaters. And the different types of electric heaters. And you're going to find these things. They're small heaters. Some of them work. Most of them these days work pretty well.
They
Actually,
do. Yeah, they do.
and if your office is maybe a small 12 or a room is a 12 by 12 or 12 by 10, not a problem to heat that thing up. And you'll find different types of these in the big box stores or other type of hardware stores. And Larry, some of the ones that that I've used are the electric coil ones. Now those were the real. Remember the old ones? They kind of look like an open toaster.
Yeah, that's old school, right? I mean, and they come in several different varieties, right?
Exactly. I remember back in the '60s, that thing. It was probably one of the more dangerous units.
Yeah. You can still buy them, by the way.
Like an open toaster with just a nichrome wire, in there that
you'd watch it glow and get hot, right? And then it usually had a little fan behind it blowing air over it.
Right. If you were lucky, you had the fan.
If you're lucky, you had the fan. Yeah, that's true.
Otherwise it was radiant. And the if you got too close to anything with it, you're going to set things on fire. And that's one of the things that has really caused a kind of the industry to move to a couple of other types of heaters,
right.
And safety devices within those heaters,
right.
Folks, and you have to be careful, folks, of any of these things, and we'll put some other cautionary things in there as we talk about them, but you don't want to use these around any combustibles just anyways. I mean, they have tip over switches, they have all kinds of things, but
they still get hot.
And they get hot.
Yeah.
And they get hot. And some of them, they will burn you.
And they will melt plastic.
And yes. Yeah. Right. So, I had the ceramic heaters, they look like a little cube.
Yes.
Most of them, they look like a little cube. You've got one, right?
I've got one. I've got two of them, actually. But.
And they, they have a little fan in there. And those things work great. I know a lot of people, they put them like underneath their desk and things like that,
I keep my feet warm with them, because if my feet are warm, the rest of my body's warm. And they'll heat the room too. They really will heat the room. It's really not. They're pretty efficient as well. Put out a lot of heat. They are pretty safe. They don't get quite as hot as electric coil. I guess, John, should we give a description of how, like, all electric heaters heat something, right? They heat it up and make it hot, and then there's a way for air to get heated by that hot thing, right? I mean, if we explain it that way. In the case of an electric heater, it's an electric coil of some sort. There's electric current running through it, making something hot. Am I telling the truth? Right. So that's the basic concept is there's resistance in a wire or in something that causes that particular thing to get hot. And then it's all a question of how they deliver it to the air that pushes it out. And I think in those ceramic plate ones, John, isn't it true? It heats up the ceramic. Is that what it does? And then the ceramic.
That's exactly what it does.
Yeah.
And the one thing when those things first came out, they were the real safe type of electric heaters. Electric heaters had a bad rap for a long time.
They did.
And rightly so, because some of them were just,
toasters.
I'm picturing exactly.
They were
picturing
toasters.
The ones that we used to have back in the early 70s or late 60s were just like, it was, boy, you get that thing close to anything and it's going up.
Yeah.
So the ceramic ones came out, and they, you could put a piece of tissue paper on them and they won't go up. I think that was a commercial for some of these things at one point. But you're right. It heats up that ceramic, and then there's a little fan in the back that blows through, and most of them have thermostats on them, so they turn off at a given temperature and things like that. They're very they're very efficient for small rooms. I mean, they're all designed not to blow a common circuit.
Right.
Not going to go over 15 amps on a circuit. It's kind of like a hairdryer, if you will. Now if you plug two of them in the same circuit,
you might have problems. Maybe
you might have an issue.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
But they are pretty safe, and they'll probably heat up around the 600 square foot area, somewhere around there. Most of them are advertised, in that area. So
which is a pretty good size.
Which is a very good size. Yeah, it's a very
size.
good size. And I will tell you that I've got one of these oil-filled radiator-looking things. Now, it looks like the old-fashioned radiators that you see,
like a steam radiator, but it's not steam.
Right. Yeah, right. But it's the same thing. You heat it up. You heat that hot oil up, and that oil inside there
Goes
is
up into the
causing all these
fins,
fins,
right? Yeah.
and the heat's just coming off this thing, and that thing is a monster. I mean, now it's quiet. That's what I really like about it. So I put it in my office, and you can't, there's no fan on it, so it's I really liked it for business because it was number one. It was a monster. That thing it really could heat up a room, and it was silent. Some of these others you're going to hear the fan whining. But so that's the one that I have. I've got two of them.
Yeah. Do you have any? Have you ever used a radiant heater? And explain what a radiant heater is.
Yeah, so I have, and that is just where it's actually got a parabolic lens in the back of it, like
right.
a headlight.
Right.
And you're just heating up an element in the middle of it, and heat really moves. Heat really moves in a couple of in about three different ways, and that's really conduction, convection, and radiant. And that's the way heat moves around. And these things is radiant, and it's just reaching out to other objects in the room from a heat wave, and it's heating that up through that wave, like
it's kind of like light. It's like sunlight.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Just like a light, like you'll see in a McDonald's. Is there heat? They're keeping fries warm. That type of thing.
Oh, yay. That's a great analogy, John. Look, we're keeping our French fries.
Yeah, it's keeping. Yeah, so you're the fry, and
so you're the fry. Yeah.
and that's the way it works.
Yeah,
and that's the way it works. I will tell you, I was in a discount store, one of these big box discount stores, and they had one of these things, and it was mind blowing. Actually, they had it going on.
Yeah,
and if you walked by it, it was like somebody had a match on you.
Yeah,
and you couldn't pick. I was like, where the heck is that heat coming from? But it's that some of these things are that powerful where you can really feel it. So once that radiant heat, which is like light, once it goes out and it heats something, then the conduction and convection starts to take place.
Right, and it kind of heats the objects in the room, and that heats the room. That's how
correct.
It works.
That's exactly right. It's like light. It's like light coming through your window, hitting your chairs and your carpet, right?
Yep.
And it gets hot inside your room because now it's the convection's taking place. Anyways, so but yes, I have used those before.
So I mention them just because that's part of our conversation. Basically, I think we've gone over all the styles, right? So they either heat the air via different means, and so that's what our point is on these. And so we talked about electric. Let's talk a little bit about other fuels that get used for them, right? Because both you and I, we both had what they're called forced air heaters. I always called them, I think my dad always called it a salamander. I think that was a brand name a million years ago. But these things, they're generally long and cylindrical, right, John? You called it a bullet heater, which is kind of the same thing. Yeah. But they're a long cylindrical thing, and they've got a big fan in them. It's a big fan. And what they do is they shoot, usually it's kerosene. They shoot kerosene into a combustion chamber, and it sounds like a jet engine. That's my opinion.
Right. And most of the people out there, folks, is that you're probably familiar with these things. If you haven't used one before, you'll see them on the sidelines of football games.
You'll see them in construction sites. You'll see them any place people want to heat. It's a big
long
area.
torpedo looking. It's a long torpedo looking thing, and I will tell you that man, those things, those things can throw off some heat. We used to rent them when I was up north, and we wanted to work on cars in the garage.
Yep.
And we used to rent those things back in the day. And the garage would get hot with, now we're talking about
minutes, too hot.
And we're talking about when it's like 0 out,
right,
or less. And that thing is like a lifesaver.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, I've used them millions of times. I even had one here in Atlanta, long story, but every so often, folks, it does get cold enough. I had diesel trucks years ago, and it would get so cold that the diesels really wouldn't crank that well. I mean, they'd literally be so cold that they just wouldn't crank. I'd fire that thing up, I'd aim it right at the engine, and about 4 or 5 minutes, that engine was hot. I mean,
oh
hot.
man,
And it'd fire right up. Boom, done. And then once it's running, of course, the internal heat keeps it warm. So took the heater off, But I used the same thing, just like you, John. Growing up, working in a garage, living in cold country, cold COLD, not COAL, cold country, and you needed to heat up an uninsulated garage. With those things, you just didn't care. I mean, they'd put off some BTUs. I mean, tremendous amounts of heat come out of those things. Downside, they are noisy. They do sound like a jet engine. At least that's what I think. I mean, it's it's like
right.
But
right. They're noisy, and they do have a function. And once again, this is kind of, I would put these things that, I'm putting this in a category of a temporary space heater. Versus that, if I was going to heat my garage all the time, I'd put in a natural gas, little furnace that would hang from the ceiling.
Right. These are portable, though. We're talking portable heaters here.
Right. Yeah. So folks, if you need something like that, we're describing is where you might have a barn, you might have a garage that you want to heat up, a storage area,
anything.
These things. And Larry, I was a little surprised when I was looking at them. Is that, now it didn't seem like they cost all that much.
They've really come down in price from years ago. They're pretty reasonable. Small ones, you can get a small one a little over $100. Small one. It's all relative, right? 55,000 BTUs. The average electric heater that we're talking about is what, John? About 1,200 BTUs, 5,000 maybe?
5,000.
5,000.
Yeah, about 5,000.
Yeah. So these are 10 times the heat for, and they're in and then they go up from there. And of course, as the capacity gets higher, they get a little more expensive. But they're not, you used to rent them because back in the day, they were expensive. They were many hundreds of dollars, many, many, many hundreds of dollars.
Yeah. And when $100 was more than $100 today.
Yeah. Today, that equivalency would have been $1,500. They were a lot of money back in the day, a lot of money. And and now for whatever reason don't care, but they're certainly much more realistic or more reasonable. And they come in a bunch of different sizes now, where I always remember there was only like 2 sizes, and they were basically big. They were wheelbarrow style. They had big tanks underneath them, and that was it. That's all I ever remember growing up. Now you can get little handheld ones. I saw one, John. I saw one put out by DeWalt that runs on a battery. It runs on propane, because folks, this same heater can be. Some of them are dual fuel, so they'll run on propane or on kerosene. But DeWalt has a propane one that runs on a battery. So I mean, it's that small. It's tiny. It's this little tiny thing. I'll bet it kicks out some heat too. But I thought it was kind of interesting.
It's incredible. But, back to the pricing on this is that if I had to, if I had to heat my garage and I was, just occasionally, for $100 and something bucks, $135 or $150 to buy one of these things, hey, I'd buy a small one, and that thing that'd be wonderful in there for those times that I would need it. Now I know some of you folks, like my buddy that lives up in Chicago, he put in a regular, type of furnace that hangs from the ceiling. But, I just don't go out there all that often.
Right.
And the weather here isn't that bad. But if I was to do it, and I needed something temporary like that, I mean, for $135, that's pretty inexpensive, because the electric heaters that we were just talking about, they range from anywhere from $50 to $200. So,
you can get them a little less expensive than that, but they just don't. It's all based on how much heat they put
so you kind of know where, from a price range, what these things can do. So it's good to know that these things exist out there, and there's a solution to these cold these cold places that you want to work in.
Question on the forced air heaters: would you use it inside?
No, not inside your house per se. Now the kerosene heaters are safe to use inside, and there are some caveats here, right? The ones that we were just talking about, the big bullet ones, no, no. I mean, you burn yourself out of the house with those things,
pretty much.
But the small little kerosene heaters, and they look like the old Coleman lamps.
Yep.
Some of them look like those things.
So these are wick heaters, right?
And those are wick heaters.
How these work is there's a wick in it, and the wick actually draws the oil up and then burns. It burns. So it's kind of like a big candle, for lack of a better word, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. You just have to be, you have to be careful with them. Now, you can use those inside, but they do give off some carbon monoxide, just like a candle.
Right.
And a fireplace.
Right. Now,
you don't want to use them in an unventilated area, like you close yourself off in a little room and you've got this thing in there.
Right.
But they do put off a little bit of carbon monoxide. And however, so you kind of go up in BTUs, if you will, heat output from the little electric heaters to like a wick heater, what we're talking about now, to those bullet heaters,
right?
The salamanders, you want to call them,
right?
So those little ones, those little kerosene heaters, do a great job.
They do.
They can kick out some heat.
So, John, why do they use kerosene? Do you know?
Well, they've used kerosene for a long time on this, and it's not combustible like like gasoline is. The fumes,
right?
It's safer. Okay,
that's part of it. What's the other reason? Burns clean.
Yeah,
burns clean.
It doesn't put off that all the carbon.
Correct.
Pollutants and things like that.
There's very little. The only time you'll get carbon is when you start it and you turn it off. When you start it and squash it, right? So you'll get a little black soot that comes out of it when you first start it and when you first shut it off. And it's between those times that kerosene burns very, very cleanly. So this goes back to way back when they used to burn whale oil in lamps because it burns very, very cleanly. Yeah. And then they changed over to kerosene to run lamps, and they ran kerosene lamps because they burn very cleanly compared to even the candles. Candles actually put off quite a bit of soot. So when we use these heaters inside, you don't want a lot of soot. I would say that's one of the things about the forced air heaters, the salamanders, if we want to call them that they do put off a little bit of an odor. You can kind of tell when you're using one.
I mean, that thing's in a different league than these things, I'll tell you that much. You're really blowing and going on that one.
Yeah.
But the little ones are good, and I know most people, I don't know if you know that, when they first were breaking down oil, that they were throwing gasoline away. They didn't know what to do with it, but they kept the kerosene.
It was all about kerosene.
Yeah, it was all about kerosene. So anyways.
It's your history lesson at the Handyman Pros Radio Show.
That's your history lesson. How would you like to be the recipient? I don't want this gasoline. Here you go.
Yeah.
So, the kerosene heaters are, they're a great option. They're great. All these are great options, and they all have a kind of a specific usage.
So let's talk a little bit about propane, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so propane heaters come basically in two kinds. It's a forced air heater, which we were talking about. It's the salamander type heater that basically instead of shooting in kerosene, it just shoots propane in. So propane, folks, is liquid petroleum, LP, or propane, and so it's liquid, and you can actually shoot it out, and it has it's a long story. We won't get into it too much, but we won't get into a science lesson on it. But it shoots a little propane in there, that gets aerated, turns it into gas, and voila, you're burning. And it creates heat exactly the same way. Tons of heat come out of those forced air propane heaters. Not something generally you'll use it in your garage or you'll use it on a construction site with no insulation, but you're generally not going to use it in your house to heat your house. Now, if your house has a propane furnace, it's basically the same thing, right? Just like a natural gas furnace or a kerosene heater furnace, it's the same thing, or electric heat pump, right? It's all basically the same thing. But propane just in general for home use, generally not used inside, although it actually burns cleaner than kerosene. It's just it puts out so much heat that you generally wouldn't use it because it's so hot. I mean, they're so hot. And then the other propane heaters that you see a lot of are radiant heaters. And those have, if you've seen the propane, like a barbecue bottle, and it has usually 3 of them. They look like cones, almost like 3 plates, but they're made out of a shiny metal, usually like aluminum or stainless steel. And they get really hot in the center, and they radiate that heat out, much the same way an electric radiant heater works. But they can do the same thing with propane. And John, those ones you were talking about the radiant heater you were talking about in the stores, those are natural gas, which is they're plumbed into the whole house. So the same thing. They put off a tremendous amount of heat, tremendous. And the only place I've ever seen anybody use radiant is in construction sites. Personally, that's the only place.
Well, I will tell you that most people would experience these in outdoor dining.
And
and
there's that.
That thing that looks like an umbrella.
Yep.
That's kind of on fire on the top.
Yep.
That's a propane radiant heater. Yep. So you put the bottle in there, and we had one at our flying club, right?
Yep.
Sure and those things work. Those things work great. They work great.
They heat large areas. Large areas. They really do. So, all right, John. Do we have anything else on on portable heat?
Yeah, no, not really. One of my thoughts was, while we're discussing furnaces and things like that, was just, since everybody, like I said earlier, that everybody's working at home, and now it's getting cold out all over the place. Save yourself some money, save yourself some, a little aggravation of all that kind of stuff, and just buy yourself a little heater, and you're good to go in your office.
You brought up an interesting point. You were talking about the flying field, John. We forgot the one other type of portable heat that there is. The old 55-gallon drum filled up with wood.
Yeah. Well, don't be burning any of that stuff inside.
It's a long story that we'll tell you sometimes, folks.
That's
but
a
anyway,
long story.
It is what it is. John, what do you think that the people on the spaceships, what do you think they heat with?
They've got some kind of new wild technology, Larry. I don't know what it is.
How do you know that? I know why.
Well, it looked like a 55-gallon drum
with some wood. Did it have bullet holes in the side? Never mind.
All bullet holes in it. Yep.
So the spaceship, that's how they heat the spaceships. Wow. Unbelievable. Folks, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please send us an email, questions@handymanprosradioshow.com. Go to our website. You can leave us a voice message, handymanprosradioshow.com. Again, up in the left-hand corner, there's left-hand or right-hand, I can't remember. One of the corners, there's this place where it says click and leave a message here. Or you can join our Facebook group. That's at Handyman Pros on Facebook. Or you can follow us on Twitter at Handyman Radio. We would love to hear from you.